Thanks very much for your presentation. Thanks for being here today. This space is part of Learning by Producing, which is part of the Chacra system in Aapresid. This is a development platform to respond to growers' needs with two premises, learning by producing and horizontal or network protagonism. This is part of the integrated agriculture and cattle raising production systems in order to improve competitiveness of integrated agriculture and cattle raising systems. And the spirit of this panel was to put this horizontal protagonism and ascribe greater value to it. We have the responsible for technical management, Clara Aranguren, who's going to present the lines of work based on system analysis and the opportunities for improvement. Then the vision of two growers who are part of the integrated system Chacras, and Javier Freddy, one of the expert panel table members which seeks to bring together experts, growers, university specialists, and try to meet growers' demand in this fashion. And this is supported by growers, and many of the things that we are going to share today come from a joint production. I'm going to give the floor to Clara, who is an agricultural engineer from the University of Buenos Aires and responsible for technical development. Good morning, everyone. How are you? The idea was, before starting, to explain what is La Chacra Sistemas Integrados, La Chacra Integrated Management Systems, and why we started this. This started because of some questions that growers started raising. First, what tools do we have at hand to prevent loss of productivity in our systems? Secondly, how we can achieve more stable companies, and thirdly, how can agricultural and cattle raising integration provide us with tools in order to realize these two objectives. That was the start of La Chacra's objectives, to develop more competitive systems based on existing synergies. We are working along three lines of work. The first one is improving systems, which seek to improve productive and environmental performance in integrated systems. In doing so, we are conducting a survey and diagnosis in order to identify areas for improvement and also identify successful systems for each Chacra environment. And secondly, the objective is to identify agricultural crop rotations, service crop, and perennial prairies rotation. We are working along three lines of work there. First, we are part of the grazing network, and there we assess the effect of service crop grazing on beef production and crop yield. Also, we want to assess the impact of prairie rotation on soil health and soil productivity. And lastly, find some optimal balance or proportion between the years where the field is allocated to agriculture and when it is used for perennial prairie or grazing growing. And lastly, to transfer and share what we have learned. We're going to share some of this information with you today. And when we started with this survey and diagnosis, we realized that the focus or the areas for improvement were found mainly in cattle raising. So the idea is to determine, using growers' tools, what tools we have available to improve cattle raising in these integrated systems. When we started conducting this diagnosis and assessment, the idea was to assess production, cattle raising indicators, agricultural indicators, environmental, economic indicators, and integration indices for each of them. Because of the lack of time, today we will discuss integration indices, cattle raising indices, and some agricultural indices. You can see there all the areas making up this chacra, this farm. It covers La Pampa, Buenos Aires, and Córdoba, which provides with some complexity, but at the same time it allows us to look into very different cattle raising agriculture integration systems. We will be discussing these 5 systems, which are La Mariana, Quemu, Santa Elena, Quemu, Chalfeni, and La Juanita in azul. So that you have an idea of what we say or what we mean for each system. Santa Elena is a complete cycle system, and the forage is alfalfa. La Juanita is a breeding system with short breeding on winter crops. The 2N is for rebreeding, and the main resource is green fodder. La Mariana uses alfalfa as a main resource, and Cerro Naposta Grande has the full cycle with breeding on the hills. When we started surveying and diagnosing each of the systems, the first challenge consisted in assessing integration. Even though it appears to be simple, it became ever more complex. There's no clear methodology as to how to show agriculture and cattle raising integration. The first idea was that integration be always performed on agriculturally apt soils. So we classified the different soils for each system. You can see that in the case of, except for Cerro Naposta Grande, in the majority of the other cases, the soils are apt for agriculture. Once we had those ratios, we wanted to explain what percentage of the agriculturally apt soil rotated between agriculture and cattle raising in the past 10 years. And you can also see that all 5 systems are highly integrated, where both agriculture and cattle raising are used alternatively throughout the different fields. And the 2 systems with the lowest percentage are Cerro Naposta Grande and La Juanita. This is accounted for by the area devoted to cattle raising. These soils, even though generally classified as agricultural soils, for corporate reasons and suitability reasons, are used for cattle raising. Once we had defined what the ratio was between the area allocated to agriculture and to cattle raising, the idea was to explain how that area was used. And in order to explain how agriculture and cattle raising were integrated in each system, we defined the ratio in the use of area in the 2024 crop year, and we defined what proportion was used for agriculture, for perennial prairies, for perennial crops, and for grazing areas that were not rotated with agriculture.
In this way, we could explain and see integration in the different systems. When we assessed Santa Elena and La Mariana, we were able to see that the main forage is perennial prairies with cover crops and agricultural crops. If we compare this to La Juanita, we can see that the main grasslands are cover crops. Now, going into improvement opportunities, our goal was to find out what cattle breeding activity would justify the use of agricultural soil. When we analyze the cost of kilo salt with no leasing, which is a dark green is a higher values, yellow is lower values, we can see that the highest cost per kilo produced with no leasing is found at Santa Elena. This is due to the fact that the main forage resource at Santa Elena is winter cover crops and alfalfa. When we compare this to other soils with breeding on non-agricultural soil, we can see that the costs per kilo go down. So we wanted to show that apparently integrated systems are more competitive when you have breeding on agricultural use soil. These are improvement opportunities. These are pictures of the 23-24 season, and we can see that weeding percentages were a little bit below of what we usually see in our system. And this is why we consider this could be improved. And secondly, we analyzed all systems, and we wanted to find out whether it was possible to improve the number of animals. In terms of breeding opportunities, the goal of this graph is based on the last line, which is beef production with the different systems, explain how the beef productivity is achieved and what improvement opportunities we see. If we consider Santa Elena, La Mariana, and Las Dos, we can see that beef production is similar, but when we break it down, we can see that they achieve this in different ways. Santa Elena achieves 168, production is 329, duration is 343 days. At La Mariana, beef production is similar, but the number of animals is twice as much, and daily gain is 320 grams a day. Then we have Las Dos N with a similar production. Duration is shorter, 275 days, and daily gains are 408 grams. So what can we do to maximize our beef production? If we take a look at La Dos N, which is the best to consider in this case, we can see that daily gains are below what we'd like to achieve. And we were able to see that this might be improved by planning grazing better. In order to do this, we considered moderate grazing, leaving 15 to 20 centimeters in winter cover crop. This will help us increase our growth rate and improve growing rates. We also decided to adjust frequency and permanence of animals on the grassland and try to avoid the presence of that material. At the same time, we also consider that it might be possible to achieve stocking density to 3.8. In order to make diagnosis, we use the yield or productivity diagram that tries to explain how the different systems achieve the corresponding beef production and what values can be adjusted to maximize beef production. And we can see that by moving some factors, we can improve production. In the case of La 2N in 23-24, the global production was 136 kilos per hectare, and we were able to see that it might be possible to reach 694 kilos per hectare. And how can this be achieved? With annual production of rebreeding going from 322 to 600 kilograms per hectare. To achieve this, we need to go from 400 grams a day to 600 grams a day in weight gain, and to go from 3 to 383 heads per hectare. This would lead to a final weight of 304 and would help us get into the pen with better values. So if we want to achieve the same slaughtering weight, we would need shorter duration, only 85 days, that could go down to 50 days. And if we consider that by analyzing cost of kilo produced, we saw that breeding had lower cost than finishing. So in this way, we would be able to produce more kilos at lower prices. And with these changes, we go from 536 kilos per hectare to 694 kilos. A second case we analyzed was La Mariana. We were able to see that production could be improved. 23-24 was one of the driest autumn seasons over the past 20 years. Stocking density was high. The climate was semi-arid, semi-dry, so we had low weight gains, and this affected beef production. So after exchanges with other producers, the recommendation we decided was to stabilize stocking chain by adding silage capacity so as to maximize beef production in those years. And secondly, the second question we asked was whether integration really had an impact on agriculture. So we carried out some analysis using historic data, and we assessed whether relative yield of sunflower would change after a certain number of years with rotation agriculture. This was carried out at La Mariana, and we were able to see a trend. The longer the time on agriculture, the better the yield. When we tried to do the same analysis at Cerro Naposta Grande, we found a point cloud, and we're not able to see any differentiating results. And in order to keep answering this question as to whether integration has an impact on agriculture, we analyzed La 2N. As we have already said, the main crop is cover crop, and when we assessed historic yield of corn as compared to fallow, we're not able to see a difference. And when we compare soybean with veg or soybean with fallow, apparently veg does not affect the yield of the following leaf. as opposed to a second crop where the gains are lower. And finally, in order to answer these questions, we also analyzed Santa Elena. They have a 10-year-long rotation, 4 years of prairie and 6 years of agriculture. In those 6 years, the second year they do wheat 1 and then wheat 2. Wheat 1 does not use nitrogen as fertilizer, while wheat 2 is fertilized with urea. When we compare yield of wheat 1 and wheat 2, we were able to see that wheat 1 historically has had better yields without nitrogen fertilization. And this is the result of rotation. So what have we learned so far? First, agriculture cattle breeding integration was carried out regardless of the environments. It was different in all systems. Integration with breeding was mostly organizational type, taking advantage of those environments that were not the right ones for agriculture. Thirdly, there are improvement opportunities for rebreeding, especially in terms of weight gain and stocking density management. And finally, integration may have a positive impact on companies' competitiveness, but this needs further analysis. Thank you, Clara. Your presentation was very clear, lots of information, large diversity of production systems, different strategies to do agriculture, cattle breeding integration, and we also see lots of improvement opportunities to be analyzed. We'll now give the floor to two members of that farm. Alberto Barbarre is an agricultural engineer from Mar del Plata National University. He's member of that Aapresid farm, and he's been at Las Dos N farm for a long time. So the triggering question for Alberto is, how do you see the integration of both systems, and how do you see this from the perspective of a member of the farm? Good morning, everyone. I apologize, but I remember in 2004 we had our first Aapresid Congress, and doing cattle breeding with no-till was a utopia. When doing cattle breeding in 100% agricultural fields was almost an insult. And what would we do? Would follow the trends, and we did what everyone else did. 3 liters of Roundup and soybean, and we looked after our soil, and we looked after the whole production system. Obviously, that implied harder work. And human beings tend to go to the easier way and to pay homage to all those weird creatures we have found in our farm over time. I'd like to talk about this topic, this exchange of information that helped us realize that we had done lots of things the right way, but it was better to have people with us who had also done things correctly. And we made lots of mistakes, so having specialists such as Javier, Leandro, Gabriel, and all those people who worked so long in agriculture and cattle breeding, Americans would be jealous of us because we have agriculture, cattle breeding systems, and we looked after those systems in an unparalleled way. Today, thank God, I found lots of other people who have helped us and given us lots of information that we did not have. I hope we will keep on working with these farms for a long time, because all of us together know much more than each of us individually. There are many. The contribution of so many people is really a great thing. Thank you very much. Thank you, Balbito. I will now give the floor to Federico Comiso, who is also an agricultural engineer, beef producer, and agricultural farmer. He's also president of Las Encadenadas farm. He's also worked at Santa Elena. So the question for you is the same. What can you tell us about integration, and what is your perspective as a member of the Integrated System project? Well, I grew up in this environment. It was natural for me. We would call this mixed systems in the past. And the interesting thing about this is a concept of integration. We would call ourselves mixed producers, but depending on everyone's heart, the trend would go more for agriculture or cattle breeding, and one of the activities would always be less important than the other. Now we have incorporated this concept, which is working on the interaction of the different activities to leverage synergies, or at least so as not to have a negative impact on any of those activities. But I'm convinced that the results are promising. And in terms of participating in the farm, I can say the same thing that Balbito said. This farm is forcing us to organize data, to compare production. In agriculture, it's easier than in cattle breeding. Cattle breeding, we accumulate lots of data. We do have the data, but it's harder for us to analyze them. And I think this farm is forcing us to do this. And this is great because we're starting to see things that we're doing correctly, other things that we're not doing correctly. And that's the goal of this project. That's why this makes sense. This exercise is amazing. The exchange of information is great. We are not yet seeing the whole impact, but in 3 different farms, we were able to achieve the same beef production using different strategies, as Clara showed. And there is lots of information there to analyze so as to find out why this is happening and what synergies, what things can be leveraged to achieve further improvements. This is great. We hope that we will learn a lot along the way. Aapresid is present as usual, and I hope we will be able to reach our goal. Thank you. Thank you very much, Fede. This is the result of joint work. Clara is a technical head, but we also have the specialists, farmers, producers. What Clara showed implies lots of backstage work. I will now give the floor to Javier Freddy, who is member of the specialist panel. He's a professor at National University in the center of the province of Buenos Aires. He's also a member of the specialist panel, and he's a consultant for cattle breeding companies. So what can you tell us about the farm, and where are we heading with this project? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Greetings to all vets and agricultural engineers who are here. Going back to what Balbito said, when I was called upon to participate in the Chacra system, in the farm system, I did not quite understand what it was about. I've seen so many projects, programs coming from different institutions that are always taken down vertically. Well, we're now going to work with cows and bulls. fertilization, this or that, but they would never ask producers what they needed. But finding a platform where they would work based on a clear demand by farmers was great. We're seeing that our productive system is being deteriorated. Our production is going down. What's happening? And getting together within the framework of Aapresid and building together and requesting support from academic institutions so that all of us together can contribute scientific rigor this will help us improve our systems and expand this to other regions. As to how I see this farm, well, in farming, in cattle breeding, we have lots of information. But sometimes, in some sectors, we see that there are no data. So now we need a methodology. We have to say, well, let's start organizing all our data in this way. And considering this methodology, we will be able to compare data and achieve the results we were looking for. What cattle breeding is doing is strengthening agriculture. This is why we are talking about integrated system rather than mixed system. We're thinking of doing agriculture, having cattle breeding on agricultural soil. What for? So that we can provide benefits to the soil and how we can leverage and improve commercial crops. Now, looking forward, in the future, we'll have to organize our data so that the database we have will be robust. In the past, it was difficult to find the connecting lines joining all the systems. But we need protocols for the different environments. For those who would like to take advantage of this opportunity, because the environmental diversity is huge. So what we can do at a farm with 900 millimeters rainfall cannot be done at a different site with only 600 millimeters rainfall and 1.5% of organic matter. We need different priorities and strategies, but with different strategies, you can also reach the same beef production. So we have to start analyzing each of those strategies and the different types of environments, having different protocols that can be scaled up. We can invite others to join us. And obviously, we also have to educate people. We have to train people and communicate this information in many different ways. This is how I see the future. Even though I know that this farm will work for a specific time, 3 years, it will be very difficult to achieve our goals in those 3 years. During the first 3 years, we will be able to gather, collect, organize, and analyze information so that eventually we can see where to go and carry out processes, accelerating processes so that we will be finished in 3 years' time will not be a good idea. This farm will need more time to achieve all the goals and the main goal, which is a very important goal. Thank you very much. Thank you, Javier. We will now have a Q&A session. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank all members of this farm, and I'd also like to thank all the companies that support us. And if you're interested in joining this project, please get in touch with us. You can see our contact information here on the screen. Are there any questions from the audience? Do we have a mic here? Hello, good morning. Thank you for this information. My question is about these integration systems. Do you have any experience in a different kind of integration? Instead of feeding animals on cover crop, having livestock separated on permanent grasslands, and after the cycle, going to an agricultural system with cover crops, and so on and so forth? Or do you see other benefits in animals feeding on those cover crops? In Azul, we have a farm, and Rafa is one of the owners, and he's here with us, where 93% of the field is 1.2 meters deep, except for a part that's drier. And we have been doing mixed system for 40 years, and we have been doing no-till for 20-something years. And Rafa's uncle once told me, what can we do to have our shelf is full all the time? Well, in this way, today we're rebreeding over 3,000 animals in 2,000 hectares. And what we have seen is something that Clara showed. Some days ago, I showed to Leandro and Gabriel the data from the last 15 years of agriculture, and we're seeing that the first 10, 12 years, soybean and fallow would give us a little bit more as compared to soybean on oat, and then we started adding veg, so we're seeing that yield of soybean on grazed fallow land. We always use barley and veg because we use our corn for the pens. Now we're seeing that soybean on veg and oat is giving us better results. As Carvalho said, I think we're at 2.8 or 3 heads per hectare, and we're seeing a growing number of benefits. I know this is a very special plot, it's very resilient, it's different from what's happening in the west or in the southwest, but we're improving agriculture, having cattle breeding in the same fields. Out of all the soybean on veg, out of all our corn, 20% goes on oat and veg, and we're improving our yields. And we started with no-till in 1987. Our average was 5.96% of organic matter, and after 27 years of agriculture and cattle breeding with no-till, the percentage is still 5.95 of organic matter. So we have been able to achieve something that has not been achieved in other sites. Thanks to cattle breeding and thanks to this integration, we were able to keep soil quality. And we have grassland, and that improves organic matter a bit more.
Our environment is completely different. Ours is a different type of soil with 700 millimeters a year and 80 centimeters approximately of rock. That rotation design involves that sometimes growers, in their eagerness to have a dual crop, those that are the culprits are the winter crops, service crops. We have to work on that transition. We have worked on working and rotating jobs. We used to use sunflower, and there was a problem because there was no recharge period, and moisture consumption affected the crop, and yield variability increased. Then late corn appeared in our area with a low density. We could use that, and we also learned to engage in different grazing practices. It's not the same as before. So paying attention to that interaction. I mean, the concept of integration leads us to that. In the past, well, the mixture depended on who preferred cattle and those who preferred agriculture. That's the challenge of integrated systems. And on the other hand, there's a very interesting paper by Julio Galli where the different grazing practices stimulate root development, and that would translate in better benefit vis-a-vis the other practices. And that's the spirit of our activity, to put a figure to it and use that as a rule, and then to this discussion whether cows are enemies to agriculture or not. There are arguments to refute that. A clarification. These systems are far more complex than just managing cows on the one hand and crops on the other. Far more complex, and today they need a more agronomic approach. And what animals do is contribute all the benefits. I just wanted to mention that. They do provide benefits. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. And by way of ad for tomorrow, as Clara said at the beginning of the presentation, we participate in articulation with the network, and we discuss the impact on subsequent crops. And as Clara showed, integration strategies are different, including perennial pastures. The discussion is very interesting. We are talking about the use of grazing crops and cover crops. Good morning. Actually, this is to supplement the previous question. I come from the time where cattle raisers were few in Aapresid, and we used, we had no room. Now that relative prices have changed, there is greater interest in integration, which, as the engineer said, it needs for common sense, exchanges. I have always been a cattle raiser in agricultural land, and that is why I wanted to raise this comment. The same happens to me in Chaco, where growing sorghum is better than leaving the land unused. We had that clear, and we have experienced that. And in Paraguay, for the past 15 years, we have grown ryegrass, and soybean is, these fields provide the highest soybean yields. So that taboo that agriculture competes with cattle raising is not so. And as the engineer has just said, it is very important. First of all, and also what you said, of course, you need to have your heart split into both sides.
A una u otra actividad dependiendo que sea de un lado o del otro. Y creo que eso es lo que hasta ahora ha venido de alguna manera dividiendo la ganadería y la agricultura. Pero cuando uno se encuentra con que el sentido común está por encima del amor de un lado a otro, se va a dar cuenta que realmente hay un gran camino para recorrer en esta integración, pero que demanda mucho tiempo.
Yo te agradezco mucho porque de vos hemos aprendido muchas cosas, así que muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Allá. No hace falta. ¿Querés saber si habían evaluado intensificación de cría? Sobre todo en no se escucha la pregunta. Intensificación de cría, ¿se habían evaluado?
Sí, no, todavía desde la chacra la intensificación de la cría no lo estamos evaluando, la idea es seguir evaluando, estamos recién empezando, así que nada, no sé si quieren agregar.
Yo he hecho intensificaciones en cría por fuera de la chacra, en campos realmente de productores.
Como no es algo tan usual,
No, está bien, lo teníamos hecho. Básicamente el tema de la intensificación en cría pasa por el parto de las vacas, que es lo que nos va a definir y nos va a tirar todo para.
¿Tiene el micrófono apagado o soy yo? Ah, no está bien.
No, está escuchando.
No, a mí me parece que no está usando el micrófono.
Debe tener abajo. Exacto. No tiene.
Es que los ácidos grasos libres que se movilizaron, que no se llegan a ver a través de la condición corporal, se habían empezado a movilizar en los que seguían manteniendo la condición corporal. O sea, la condición corporal nos atrasa 2 meses la movilización de reservas que no se llegan a ver. Es una medida buena, pero grosera. Con lo cual, ese cultivo que era un verdeo, que fuere, posteriormente siguió en un ciclo agrícola, entonces de esa manera intensificábamos. Y después utilizar los mismos verdeos para básicamente avenas, sembradas muy temprano, para aparición de vacas en forma diferida, comiéndola en forma frontal, entonces nos permite entrar mucho más tarde al resto de campos naturales o pasturas, y eso se quemaba y iba a agricultura. Y sin ningún problema también medimos producción en semilla de soja, producción de soja, y no tuvimos problema y tampoco hubo efectos de compactación de suelos, trabajando con cargas de 6 vacas por hectárea. Esos son los trabajos en intensificación en cría. Perdón, eso lo que permitió fue aumentar mucho la carga, ¿no? De ahí la parte de intensificación.
No, para Clara, una pregunta. Creo que me pareció ver que una de las hipótesis era tratar de definir la durabilidad o el aprovechamiento de las pasturas en función de los años agrícolas. Bueno, los ambientes son muy diversos, no sé cómo se van a plantear ese vericueto.
Y sí, esa es uno de los desafíos más grandes que tenemos. un poco porque no podemos implantar un ensayo de larga duración. Entonces, un poco la idea era aprovechar la información que ya tenemos para cada una de las zonas, empezar a llamar expertos que nos capaciten como Chacra, ver experiencias zonales que nos permitan ir llegando a ese número y a su vez ir evaluando en cada sistema, según las rotaciones que tengan, qué efecto nos está dejando en el suelo. Pero no nos planteamos hacer un ensayo de larga duración.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Se ve que, bueno, por ahí si hay alguna pregunta más, bueno, se pueden acercar y lo seguimos charlando, pero bueno, no queremos demorar más los tiempos. Bueno, agradecerles la participación en el panel y no dejar de agradecer a todos los miembros de la Chacra y bueno, a disposición a sumarse al proyecto.